The darkness of space held many secrets, and today it would reveal one more. High Commander Vextai stood on the bridge of his massive ship, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. His tall, thin body cast a shadow across the metal floor as he studied the readings that appeared before him. "Commander," said Mordon, his chief scientist, "the scans are complete. This planet shows signs of primitive life forms." Vextai nodded slowly. His people had traveled across 12 star systems, building an empire that stretched farther than most species could imagine. They had met many other races, and most had been simple to understand and control. This new world looked no different. "What kind of life forms?" Vextai asked. Mordon touched a control panel, and images appeared on the screen. They showed creatures walking on 2 legs, moving around what looked like basic shelters. "They appear to be simple animals, Commander. They walk upright like many species we have seen before. Our readings show they use very basic tools and have no real technology." The images showed the creatures doing what looked like simple tasks. Some were moving items from one place to another. Others were tending to smaller versions of themselves. To the aliens, it looked like basic animal behavior. "Interesting," Vextai said. "They might be useful for simple work." Begin the collection. Process. Far below on the planet's surface, Dr. Jake Martinez floated in the space station that orbited Earth. He was looking at his instruments when something unusual appeared on his screen. The reading showed an object that was too large to be space debris, and moving in a way that no known satellite would move. "Lisa," he called to his colleague, "come look at this." Lisa Thompson pushed herself through the zero gravity to reach Jake's station. She looked at the screen and frowned. "That's probably just a sensor error. These old systems act up sometimes." But Jake was not convinced. He had been studying space for 15 years, and he knew what normal looked like. This was not normal. The object was huge and was definitely under some kind of control. It was moving toward Earth in a way that suggested intelligence behind its path. "I think we should report this," Jake said. Lisa shook her head. "Let's wait and see if it shows up again. No point in causing alarm over a computer glitch." On Earth, Ben Rodriguez was fixing a fence on his farm in Colorado when he saw the lights. At first, he thought it might be an airplane, but the lights were too bright and moving too strangely. Ben had served in the Marines for 8 years before becoming a farmer, and his training had taught him to notice things that did not belong. The lights hung in the sky for several minutes, then suddenly disappeared. Ben stood in his field, holding the fence post he had been working on, and wondered what he had just seen. He had heard stories about strange lights in the sky, but he had never seen anything like this himself. Meanwhile, on the alien ship, Vextai was receiving more detailed reports about the planet below. "The creatures seem to live in groups," Mordon explained. "They build simple structures and appear to have basic social behavior. Some groups are larger than others." The aliens watched as humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware. They were being studied. To the Zephyrians, humans looked like animals that had learned to use simple tools. They saw people driving cars and thought it was a basic form of transportation. They saw cities and thought they were large animal communities. "They do not appear to have any real weapons," another scientist reported. "No energy signatures that would suggest advanced technology." Vextai was pleased. His people had learned that the best way to build their empire was to find useful species and put them to work. These creatures looked like they might be smart enough to follow orders, but not smart enough to cause trouble. "Begin the collection," he ordered. "Start with small numbers. Take them from areas where the others will not notice right away." The first abductions began that night. Amy Collins was working late at the national park where she served as a ranger. She was checking on a campsite when a bright light suddenly appeared above her. Before she could react, everything went dark. Tony Adams was driving home from his construction job when his truck suddenly stopped working. He got out to check the engine when the same bright light appeared. Like Amy, he found himself unconscious within seconds. The aliens used stunning technology that made their targets fall asleep immediately. To them, it was no different from catching wild animals for study. They carefully selected humans who were alone and far from others, just as they would when capturing any other species. Jake Martinez was still watching his instruments when the readings became even stranger. The large object had moved closer to Earth and seemed to be releasing smaller objects. These smaller objects were moving toward the planet's surface. "Lisa, you need to see this now," he said, his voice urgent. This time, Lisa could not ignore the readings. The screen clearly showed multiple objects moving between the larger ship and Earth. "This is impossible," she whispered. "We need to contact ground control immediately," Jake said. But before they could make the call, their station's power flickered. Both scientists looked at each other with growing fear. Something was very wrong. Back on his farm, Ben Rodriguez was getting ready for bed when he heard his dogs barking. These were not normal barks. His dogs sounded scared. He looked out his window and saw the same strange lights he had seen earlier, but this time they were much closer to his house. Ben grabbed the rifle he kept for protecting his livestock from wild animals and stepped outside. The lights were hovering over the field where he had been working earlier. As he watched, one of the lights began moving toward him. His military training kicked in, and Ben quickly moved to a position where he could see better while staying hidden. What he saw made his blood run cold. The light was coming from something that was definitely not from Earth. It was a ship of some kind, and it was searching his property. The ship moved slowly across his land, scanning with beams of light that seemed to be looking for something or someone. Ben realized that whatever was happening, it was not good. He needed to warn others, but who would believe him? On the alien ship, Vex Tai was reviewing the first successful captures. "Excellent work," he told his team. "These specimens will help us understand the species better. Continue the collection, but be careful not to take too many from one area." The aliens had no idea that their simple hunting operation was about to become something much more complicated. They saw humans as basic animals, but they were about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving. As the night continued, more people disappeared from remote areas around the world. Each abduction was carefully planned to avoid detection. The aliens were confident in their methods and certain of their superiority. But in space, Jake Martinez was frantically trying to contact Earth with information that would change everything. The hunt had begun, but the hunters had no idea what they were really hunting. Jake Martinez woke up in a room that looked nothing like anything on Earth. The walls were smooth and gave off a soft blue light. The air felt different, and when he tried to sit up, he felt dizzy and confused. His last memory was being outside the space station when everything went bright and then dark. "You're awake," said a voice nearby. Jake turned and saw a woman sitting against one of the glowing walls. She had dark hair and was wearing clothes that looked like park ranger uniform. "I'm Amy Collins," she said. "I was taken 3 days ago." "Taken?" Jake asked, though he was starting to understand what had happened. "By aliens," Amy said simply. "I know it sounds crazy, but look around. We're definitely not on Earth anymore." Jake looked around the room more carefully. There were no windows, but he could tell they were on a ship. The humming sound in the walls and the way gravity felt told him they were in space. As a scientist who had spent years on space stations, he recognized the signs. "How many others are here?" he asked. "4 that I've seen," Amy replied. "There's Tony, who's a construction worker. A woman named Helen, who was hiking when they took her. and an old man called Pete, who was fishing by himself. As if hearing his name, Tony Adams appeared from another part of the room. He was a big man with strong hands that showed years of hard work. "You're the new guy," he said to Jake. "What's your story?" Jake explained that he was a scientist working on a space station. Tony nodded grimly. "So you know about space stuff. Maybe you can figure out how to get us out of here." "I've been trying," Jake said. "But I need to understand more about where we are and what these aliens want." The aliens had put the humans in what they thought was a suitable habitat. To the Zephyrians, it was like a zoo enclosure for intelligent animals. The room had basic furniture, food dispensers, and areas for rest. They could observe the humans through hidden sensors while keeping them comfortable. Dr. Mordoon was studying the behavior of the captured humans with great interest. "Look at how they communicate," he said to his assistant. "They use complex sound patterns and even body language, much more advanced than we expected." The assistant, a younger Zephyrian named Kexra, watched the screens that showed the humans talking to each other. They seemed to be sharing information about their captures. "Is this normal behavior for primitive species?" "Some animals do share information about threats," Mordon replied. "But this seems more organized. These creatures might be more intelligent than our initial scans suggested." On Earth, the disappearances were starting to form a pattern that caught the attention of law enforcement. FBI agent Carol Williams was sitting at her desk, looking at reports from 5 different states. All involved people who had vanished without a trace, and all had happened in remote areas during the night. "This is strange," she said to her partner, Detective Ray Johnson. 5 people, different states, no connection between them, but all disappeared the same way. Ray looked at the files. "Maybe it's a serial killer who travels a lot." Carol shook her head. "No bodies, no signs of struggle, no witnesses. And look at this. In 3 cases, people reported strange lights in the sky the same night." "Strange lights?" Ray laughed. "Come on, Carol. You're not seriously thinking about UFOs, are you?" But Carol was looking at something else in the reports. At each location where someone had disappeared, there were traces of unusual electromagnetic activity. The readings were unlike anything in their database, back on the alien ship. Jake was learning about his fellow prisoners. Helen Parker was a retired teacher who loved hiking alone in the mountains. Pete Morris was a grandfather who had been fishing at his favorite lake when the lights appeared. Each person had been alone when they were taken, and each had seen the same bright light before losing consciousness. "They're studying us," Jake told the group. "This whole room is probably full of sensors watching everything we do." Amy nodded. "I figured that out on day 2. But why? What do they want with us?" "Maybe they want to learn about humans before they make contact with our governments," Helen suggested. Tony shook his head. "If they wanted to make friends, they wouldn't have kidnapped us. I think they're planning something bigger." Jake was thinking about the technology he had seen. The ship was enormous, far larger than anything humans had built. The aliens had faster than light travel, advanced sensors, and stunning weapons. If they wanted to conquer Earth, humans would have no way to stop them. But something was bothering him. If the aliens were so advanced, why were they being so careful about studying humans? Why not just contact Earth's governments directly? "I think they don't understand us," Jake said finally. "I think they see us as animals instead of intelligent beings." The others stared at him. "Animals?" Amy asked. "Think about it," Jake explained. "They took us like someone might capture wild animals for a zoo. They put us in this room like it's a habitat. They're studying our behavior, like scientists studying a new species." Tony's face grew angry. "So they think we're pets?" "Worse," Jake sighed. "They probably think we're smart animals that might be useful for work. This idea made everyone quiet. The thought that an advanced alien species saw humans as nothing more than clever animals was frightening. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the ship, High Commander Vex Tai was receiving reports about the specimens. The creatures show remarkable adaptation, Morgan reported. They have already established social structures within their habitat and are sharing information efficiently. Good, Vex Tai said. This confirms they could be useful for simple tasks. How many more should we collect? I recommend we gather at least 50 specimens from different regions, Morgan replied. This will give us a better understanding of the species' variations and capabilities. Vex Tai approved the plan. To him, humans were an interesting discovery, but nothing more. His empire had used dozens of species as workers and soldiers. These new creatures seemed smarter than most, which would make them more valuable. Back in the human habitat, Jake was trying to figure out how the room's technology worked. As a space scientist, he understood some principles of advanced technology, but what he was seeing was far beyond anything humans had developed. The walls aren't just walls, he told the others. They're some kind of advanced material that can change its properties. The light, the temperature, even the air composition. It's all controlled by systems built into the structure itself. Amy watched him studying the walls. Can you figure out how to escape? Maybe, Jake said. But first, I need to understand more about their technology. And I need to know what they're really planning. That night, as the humans tried to sleep, they could hear sounds from other parts of the ship. Footsteps that didn't sound human, voices. Speaking in languages they couldn't understand, and the constant hum of machinery. There are probably hundreds of aliens on this ship, Helen whispered. Pete, who had been quiet most of the time, finally spoke up. My grandson is in the Air Force. If these aliens are planning to invade Earth, someone needs to warn our people. First, we need to find a way to contact Earth, Jake said. And we need to make sure they understand what kind of threat we're dealing with. Tony clenched his fists. I don't care how advanced they are. Nobody treats humans like animals and gets away with it. Jake looked at his fellow prisoners and realized that the aliens had made a serious mistake. They thought they had captured simple animals, but they had actually taken people who would not give up easily. A scientist, a park ranger, a construction worker, a teacher, and a veteran, each with skills and knowledge that the aliens didn't understand. The hunt was continuing on Earth, with more people disappearing each night. But on the ship, the captured humans were beginning to plan. They might be prisoners, but they were not helpless. The aliens thought they were studying primitive creatures. They had no idea they were about to learn what humans were really capable of when they refused to be conquered. High Commander Vex Tai stood before the Zephyrian High Council, a group of 12 ancient beings who ruled the Empire from their home world. The council chamber was vast, with walls that showed images of their conquered territories across the galaxy. Each member of the council had lived for over 1,000 years and had seen many species rise and fall. Tell us about this new world, said Elder Zixmuth, the oldest member of the council. Vex Tai activated a display that showed Earth rotating slowly in the center of the room. The planet is rich in resources and has a species that shows promise for our labor force. They are more intelligent than most animals we have encountered, but still primitive enough to be easily controlled. The council members studied the images of humans going about their daily activities. To their eyes, humans looked like any other simple species they had dominated before. They saw cities and thought they were large animal communities. They saw vehicles and thought they were basic tools. How intelligent are they? Asked Elder Morthic. Smart enough to follow complex instructions, Vex Tai replied, but not smart enough to pose any threat to our technology or authority. My science. Officer believes they could be trained for mining operations and basic construction work. Elder Zixmuth nodded slowly. The Empire always needs more workers. How many specimens have you collected? 12 so far, Vextai said, but I request permission to expand the operation. I believe we could harvest several thousand without the planet's population noticing. The council discussed this among themselves, in their ancient language. Finally, Elder Zixmith spoke again. You have permission for a larger collection. Take as many as needed to establish a proper breeding population for our work colonies. Vextai bowed. It will be done, elders. Meanwhile, on Earth, the pattern of disappearances had finally triggered a coordinated response from world governments. General Patricia Hayes sat in a secure conference room at NORAD, speaking with military leaders from around the globe via encrypted video links. The electromagnetic signatures are consistent across all disappearance sites, reported Dr. Kevin Stone, a physicist who had been studying the evidence. Whatever is taking these people has technology that operates on principles we don't fully understand. How many people are we talking about? Asked General Hayes. 43 confirmed disappearances in the last 2 weeks, replied Agent Carroll Williams, who had been tracking the cases. All from remote locations, all during nighttime hours, and all with the same electromagnetic residue. General Hayes looked at the data with growing concern. As a military leader, she understood threats, and this looked like the beginning of something much larger. Are we dealing with an invasion? Dr. Stone pulled up radar data from several countries. Our satellites have detected an object in high orbit that doesn't match any known technology. It's large enough to be a ship of some kind. A ship? General Hayes asked. Based on its size and the energy signatures we're detecting, it's at least 10 times larger than anything humans have ever built. Dr. Stone explained. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Earth was being visited by beings with technology far beyond human capabilities, and they were taking people. On the alien ship, Jake Martinez had made an important discovery. By carefully watching the patterns of light in their room's walls, he had figured out that the aliens were monitoring human communications from Earth. The walls would sometimes flicker in ways that matched television and radio broadcasts. Listening to our TV shows and radio, he told the others. But I don't think they understand what they're hearing. Amy looked confused. What do you mean? Jake pointed to where the wall had flickered during a news broadcast. When they hear a news report about sports, they probably think it's information about territorial disputes. When they hear music, they might think it's some kind of mating call. Tony laughed grimly. So they think our entertainment is real behavior? Exactly. Jake said, they're trying to understand humans by watching our media, but they don't understand that most of it is fiction or entertainment. This gave Jake an idea. If the aliens were misunderstanding human communication, maybe humans could use that to their advantage. Helen had been quiet, but now she spoke up. In my 40 years of teaching, I learned that the biggest mistakes happen when people make assumptions. These aliens are assuming we're primitive, but they haven't tested that assumption. Pete nodded. My grandfather used to say that the most dangerous enemy is the one who thinks you're weak when you're not. Back on Earth, Ben Rodriguez was having a meeting he never expected to have. 2 government agents had arrived at his farm after neighbors reported his story about the strange lights. Agent Williams and her partner were sitting at his kitchen table, listening to his account. You're sure about what you saw? Agent Williams asked. Ben nodded. I know what aircraft look like, and this wasn't one. It was searching my property, like. It was looking for something. Agent Williams made notes. Did you see anything else unusual? Any signs that someone or something had been on your land? Yeah, Ben said, leading them outside. Over here. He showed them an area in his field where the grass was flattened in a perfect circle. The ground showed traces of the same electromagnetic activity that had been found at other sites. This is where they would have taken me if I hadn't been inside. Ben said, "I think they're looking for people who are alone and isolated." Agent Williams realized that Ben might be their first witness who had avoided capture. "Mr. Rodriguez, we need your help. You might be the only person who's seen them and escaped." Meanwhile, Dr. Mordoon was presenting his findings about human behavior to the ship's senior staff. "The specimens show complex social structures," he reported. "They share information, work together to solve problems, and show signs of planning ahead." "This is good," said Captain Veltar, Vextai's second-in-command. "Smart animals are more useful than stupid ones." But Mordoon was puzzled by some of what he had observed. "There's something unusual about their behavior. The specimen who was taken from the space station seems to understand our technology better than expected." "How so?" Captain Veltar asked. "He's been studying our walls and appears to understand that they contain monitoring systems. Yesterday, he spent several hours examining the food dispensers and seems to have figured out how they work." Captain Veltar was not concerned. Many intelligent animals can learn to use simple tools. This just proves they'll be good workers. But Mordoon was still troubled. In all his years of studying other species, he had never seen animals that could adapt to alien technology so quickly. The humans were learning at a rate that seemed impossible for primitive creatures in their habitat. The humans were working on their own plans. Jake had discovered that the aliens had made a crucial error in their monitoring systems. While they could observe the humans' actions, they couldn't understand the meaning behind those actions. "We need to appear cooperative while gathering information," Jake explained. "If they think we're accepting our situation, they'll become less careful." Amy understood immediately. "Like when I'm dealing with wild animals in the park. If they think you're not a threat, they'll show you their true behavior." Over the next few days, the humans began what Jake called the performance. They acted like they were adapting to their new environment, but they were actually studying everything they could about the ship and their captors. Tony used his construction experience to understand how the ship was built. Helen used her teaching skills to figure out how the aliens learned and thought. Pete used his lifetime of experience to read the situation and predict what might happen next. Amy used her knowledge of animal behavior to understand how the aliens saw humans, and Jake used his scientific training to slowly figure out how their technology worked. The aliens, watching this behavior, were pleased. The specimens were adapting well and would soon be ready for training as workers. They had no idea that they were being studied just as carefully as they were studying the humans. High Commander Vextai received approval for a massive expansion of the collection operation. Soon, the ship would begin taking humans by the hundreds. The Zephyrian Empire would have a new slave species to add to their collection. But in their habitat, the humans were preparing for something the aliens never expected. They were not planning to escape. They were planning to fight back. The aliens thought they had captured animals, but they had actually taken some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. They had taken humans who refused to be slaves. The plan began at exactly midnight, ship time. Jake Martinez had spent weeks studying the patterns of the alien guards and had discovered that they changed shifts every 12 hours. During the shift change, there was always a 10-minute gap when the corridors were less monitored. "Remember," Jake whispered to the others, "we need to make this look like an accident. If they think we're escaping on purpose, they'll know we're more intelligent than they believe." Ben Rodriguez, who had been captured 3 days earlier while checking his farm's irrigation system, nodded grimly. His military training had been valuable in planning their operation. "Tony and I will handle the physical stuff. Amy, you and Helen watch for any aliens. Jake, you focus on the technology." The escape began when Pete Morris suddenly collapsed, appearing to have some kind of medical emergency. This was all an act, but it looked real enough to trigger the Aliens' Emergency Protocols. Two Zephyrian guards rushed into the habitat to help what they thought was a sick animal. While the guards were distracted, Tony Adams used his construction worker strength to break a loose panel that Jake had identified earlier. The break looked accidental, like normal wear and tear, but it gave them access to the ship's internal systems. Jake quickly squeezed through the opening, while the others continued to distract the guards. In the maintenance area, behind their habitat, he found exactly what he had hoped for: a computer terminal that connected to the ship's main database. His hands worked quickly on the alien controls. As a scientist who had spent years working with advanced computer systems, Jake was able to understand the basic principles of the alien technology, even though it was far more advanced than anything on Earth. Got what he discovered in their database made his blood run cold. The aliens weren't just planning to take a few dozen humans. They were planning to harvest millions. The files showed detailed plans for collection operations across every continent on Earth. But worse than that, Jake learned the full scope of the Zephyrian Empire. They had done this to dozens of other species across the galaxy. Entire civilizations had been reduced to slave populations, working in mines and factories across the alien empire. The database also contained something else: detailed information about Zephyrian technology, military capabilities, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Jake quickly copied as much information as he could to a small device he had built from broken pieces of their habitat systems. As a space scientist, he knew how to build simple data storage devices from basic components. Meanwhile, on Earth, the spacecraft Terra's Voice was preparing for launch. The ship had been built in secret over the past month, using technology from every major space agency on the planet. Captain Steve Morgan, a veteran of both the Air Force and NASA, was leading the mission. "Final systems check," Captain Morgan called out. "Navigation ready," reported his pilot, Lieutenant Kate Phillips. "Communications ready," said Ellen Foster, who would serve as the diplomatic contact if they encountered the aliens. "Weapons systems ready," reported Colonel Mike Davis, though everyone hoped the weapons would not be needed. Dr. Nancy Clark, the mission's xenobiologist, was reviewing everything they knew about the aliens. Based on their behavior patterns, they seem to prefer taking isolated individuals. This suggests they don't want to reveal themselves to our larger population yet. "Why?" asked Captain Morgan. "Unknown," Dr. Clark replied. "But it could mean they're either being careful about first contact or they're planning something that requires secrecy." The ship launched at dawn, carrying humanity's first delegation to meet an alien species. None of them knew that their mission was about to become much more complicated than anyone had planned. Back on the alien ship, Jake had finished copying the database and was carefully making his way back to the habitat. He moved slowly and quietly, using his knowledge of the ship's layout to avoid the areas where guards would be returning from their shift change. When he returned, the others were still maintaining their distraction. Pete was recovering from his medical emergency while the guards ran tests on him with their medical equipment. To the aliens, it looked like a simple health problem that had resolved itself. "Did you find anything?" Amy whispered when the guards finally left. Jake nodded grimly. "We need to talk. All of us." When they were sure the aliens weren't monitoring them closely, Jake shared what he had learned. The news was worse than any of them had imagined. "Millions of people?" Helen asked, her voice shocked. "That's just from Earth," Jake replied. "Their empire has billions of slaves from other worlds." Tony's hands clenched into fists. "We have to stop them." "How?" Ben asked. "We're 6 people on a ship with hundreds of aliens." Jake pulled out the device he had built. "With this, I copied their entire database, including information about their technology and their weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Amy asked hopefully. "There." Society is built on the idea that they're superior to everyone else, Jake explained. They've never faced a species that fought back effectively. Most of the species they've conquered were peaceful or less technologically advanced. But humans aren't peaceful, Ben said. No, Jake agreed. And we're not as technologically backward as they think. The problem is, they don't know that yet. Pete spoke up. So what do we do? Jake looked at his fellow prisoners. We wait for the right moment. Earth is sending a ship to make contact. When that happens, we need to be ready to show these aliens exactly what kind of species they're dealing with. The contact came sooner than expected. 2 days later, alarms began sounding throughout the alien ship. The humans could hear footsteps running in the corridors and voices speaking urgently in the alien language. Captain Veltar appeared on their viewing screen. Through the translation system, they could understand his words. Attention, specimens. Your planet has sent a primitive vessel to communicate with us. This is normal behavior for lesser species when they detect our presence. The humans looked at each other. Earth had sent a ship. You will be brought to observe this meeting, Captain Veltar continued. Your leaders will see that you are safe and well cared for. This will help them understand our peaceful intentions. When the guards came to escort them, the humans went quietly. But Jake had hidden his data device carefully, and each of them now knew exactly what they were really dealing with. The meeting took place in the ship's main hangar. The human delegation from Terra's Voice stood on one side, while High Commander Vextai and his officers stood on the other. The captured humans were brought in as what the aliens considered proof of their good intentions. Captain Steve Morgan looked at the 6 humans and felt both relief and anger. Relief that they appeared to be unharmed, and anger at what had clearly been kidnapping. I am High Commander Vextai of the Zephyrian Empire, the alien leader announced through his translation device. We have been studying your species and have found them to be interesting creatures. Ellen Foster stepped forward. I am Ellen Foster, representing the people of Earth. We demand the immediate return of our citizens. Vextai seemed amused by this. Your citizens are safe and well. In fact, we have a proposal that will benefit your entire species. What kind of proposal? Captain Morgan asked, though he already suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Your species shows promise as workers. Vextai explained. We are prepared to offer your leaders advanced technology in exchange for a small portion of your population, perhaps 2 or 3 million individuals. The humans from Earth stared in shock. Ellen Foster's diplomatic training helped her keep her composure, but inside she was horrified. We decline, Captain Morgan said firmly. Vextai looked puzzled. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. We are offering you a generous arrangement. Most primitive species are not given such opportunities. That was when Ellen Foster realized the truth that Jake had already discovered. You think we're animals, she said. Not animals, Vextai corrected. Intelligent creatures. Useful creatures. You should be grateful for the chance to serve a higher civilization. Captain Morgan's voice was calm but firm. Return our people and leave our system. This is your only warning. High Commander Vextai and his officers actually laughed. The idea that primitive creatures would threaten them was amusing. You will provide the workers we require, Vextai said, or we will take them by force. That was when Dr. Nancy Clark stepped forward with a tablet computer. Before you make that decision, she said, let me show you something about human history. The moment had arrived. The aliens were about to learn what humans really were. Dr. Nancy Clark activated her tablet, and images began appearing on the large screen that dominated the hangar. The first image showed ancient human warriors locked in battle. The second showed medieval knights charging into combat. The third showed soldiers from World War II storming a beach under heavy fire. "This is what you need to understand about humans," Dr. Clark said calmly. "We have spent our entire history fighting. Not just fighting other species, but fighting each other. Fighting nature, fighting impossible odds, and surviving." High Commander Vextai looked at the images with confusion. These appeared to be territorial disputes. Many species engage in such behavior. "No," Dr. Clark replied. "These are examples of humans refusing to surrender, even when defeat was certain. Let me show you more." The screen changed to show humans surviving in the coldest places on Earth, in the hottest deserts, in the deepest jungles. It showed humans climbing the highest mountains, diving to the bottom of oceans, and launching themselves into space with primitive rockets. "Your species has studied us for weeks," Dr. Clark continued, "but you made one critical error. You assumed that less advanced technology means less dangerous opponents." Captain Morgan stepped forward. "Dr. Clark is correct. You see primitive tools and think we're weak. But humans have survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and plagues that should have destroyed us. We survived all of that before we even developed modern technology." Jake Martinez, still standing with the other prisoners, caught Captain Morgan's eye and nodded slightly. It was time. "But the most important thing you need to understand," Jake called out, "is that humans have one trait that makes us more dangerous than any other species you've encountered." "And what is that?" Vextai asked, though he was beginning to sound less amused. "We never accept defeat," Ben Rodriguez said, stepping forward. "Ever." That was when Ellen Foster delivered the message that changed everything. "High Commander, we've been monitoring your ship since it arrived. We know exactly what you're planning, and we know about your empire. We also know that you've never faced a species like ours." "Impossible," Captain Veltar interrupted. "Your technology is primitive. You cannot threaten us." Ellen Foster smiled coldly. "Really? Jake, would you like to explain what you discovered?" Jake pulled out the device he had built and activated it. Suddenly, screens throughout the hangar began displaying information from the Zephyrian database. Their military plans, their slave operations, their technology specifications, and most damaging of all, their weaknesses. "You see," Jake explained, "while you were studying us like animals, we were studying you like the threat you are. Your ship's computer security is impressive, but it wasn't designed to stop someone who understands both human ingenuity and alien technology." High Commander Vextai stared at the screens in shock. "How did you access our systems?" "By doing what humans do best," Tony Adams said. "We adapted, we improvised, and we solved the problem." Amy Collins stepped forward. "You made the same mistake that every predator makes when hunting humans. You assumed we were helpless prey." Dr. Clark continued her presentation. "Let me show you what happens when humans are threatened." The screen now showed images of human resistance movements throughout history. People fighting against overwhelming odds, and often winning through determination and clever tactics. In every case, Dr. Clark explained, humans faced enemies with superior numbers, better weapons, or more resources. And in every case, the humans either won or made victory so costly that their enemies regretted the conflict. Colonel Mike Davis had been quiet, but now he spoke. "High Commander, I want you to understand something very clearly. We are not asking you to leave. We are not negotiating with you. We are telling you what is going to happen. You will return every human you have taken," Captain Morgan said. "You will leave our solar system immediately, and you will never return." Vextai looked around the hangar as more alarms began sounding. His officers were reporting that their computer systems were being infiltrated from multiple sources. Human hackers on Earth had used Jake's data device as a pathway into their networks. "This is impossible," Vextai said. You are a primitive species. No, Ellen Foster replied. We are a young species. There's a big difference. Helen Parker, the retired teacher, spoke for the first time during the meeting. In my 40 years of teaching, I learned that the most dangerous students were never the smartest ones. They were the ones who refused to give up, no matter how hard the problem was. Pete Morris nodded. And the most dangerous animal is never the biggest or strongest. It's the one that fights back when cornered. That was when the final revelation came. Captain Morgan activated his communication device, and suddenly the hangar was filled with voices speaking in multiple languages: Chinese, Russian, English, Spanish, Arabic, and dozens of others. What you're hearing, Captain Morgan explained, are the voices of every military leader on Earth. They're all connected to this conversation, and they've all heard your threat to enslave our species. General Patricia Hayes' voice came through clearly. High Commander, this is General Hayes of Earth's North American Defense Command. Be advised that every weapon system on our planet is now trained on your ship. Our nuclear submarines have launched ballistic missiles that will reach your position in 30 minutes. Nuclear weapons are primitive compared to your technology, Ellen Foster admitted. But we have thousands of them, and they don't need to destroy your ship. They just need to damage it enough to trap you in our system. Dr. Clark added, while you've been having this conversation, human computer specialists have been downloading your entire database. We now know the location of every Zephyrian ship, base, and colony in the galaxy. High Commander Vextai finally began to understand the magnitude of his error. You would start a war with a superior civilization? Ben Rodriguez laughed grimly. Commander, you still don't get it. You didn't start a war with us. Wars have rules, negotiations, and surrender terms. What you started is something much worse. You started a fight with humans, Jake added. And humans don't stop fighting until the threat is completely eliminated. Colonel Davis activated another display that showed Earth's space defenses, orbital platforms, missile systems, and space-based weapons that the aliens had completely missed during their initial scans. You see, Commander, Colonel Davis explained, you made two critical mistakes. First, you assumed our technology was primitive because it looked different from yours. Second, you assumed we would be easy to control because we looked like other species you had conquered. But humans are unique in the galaxy, Dr. Clark said. We're the only species that evolved by fighting everything on our planet, including ourselves, for millions of years. We're the only species that learned to cooperate by first learning to compete. Captain Morgan delivered the final message. High Commander, you have 1 hour to return every human you have taken and to leave our solar system. If you refuse, Earth will consider the Zephyrian Empire to be a hostile force, and we will respond accordingly. You cannot threaten us, Vextai said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ellen Foster's reply was calm and certain. We're not threatening you, Commander. We're explaining what's going to happen. You came to our system looking for animals you could control. Instead, you found the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. And now, Ben Rodriguez added, you've made us angry. The captured humans were returned to Earth within the hour. High Commander Vextai, faced with the choice between retreat and destruction, chose to withdraw. But as his ship jumped to hyperspace, he carried with him a message that would change the Zephyrian Empire forever. They had encountered a species that refused to be conquered. Worse, they had encountered a species that now knew about the Zephyrian Empire and considered it a threat to be eliminated. Back on Earth, Ellen Foster addressed the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, first contact has been made. We are not alone in the universe. More importantly, the galaxy now knows that humanity exists. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of every nation on Earth. They came looking for beasts they could control. Instead, they found humans who refused to be controlled. They wanted to know what kind of species we are. Ellen Foster smiled grimly. We answered. In the months that followed, Earth began preparing for what everyone knew was coming. The Zephyrian Empire would not ignore the threat that humanity represented. But humans had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. They had built civilization from nothing and had reached for the stars with primitive rockets. Now, for the first time in galactic history, the Zephyrian Empire faced an enemy that would never surrender, never accept defeat, and never stop fighting until the threat was eliminated. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been the most dangerous species on their own planet, and why they were about to become the most dangerous species in the galaxy.